Okay, thanks, Eric. I am Dr. Pamela Thomas. You can call me Pam. Um, Hang on, I gotta get my mouse to where I need it to be. This is Who Are You? Library of Congress Demographic Group Terms, or LCDGT. Oh, sorry. Mouse does not want to go down. Yay. Okay. Yay, now I can see my notes. All right. So today I'm going to be discussing the Library of Congress Demographic Group Terms, or LCDGT. Demographic terms can be the group's age, occupation, nationality, ethnic background, medical condition, etc. Terms in the vocabulary are used in bibliographic and authority records to describe the characteristics of creators, contributors, or the intended audience of the resource. You have probably been assigning demographic terms as subject headings without realizing it. So during this presentation, I will focus on LCDGT and bibliographic and subject authority records. The examples I have of authority records are subject authority records, and name authority records are coded differently than subject authority records. So just be aware of that. So the agenda, I'm going to give you an LCDGT definition, LCDGT background, how to use LCDGT, when to use LCDGT, where to use LCDGT. Then I'm going to talk about ethical demographic group headings, gender terms, LCDGT categories, demographic group headings, subdivision headings, and then some examples. So the LCDGT definition is: a demographic group may be defined as a subset of the general population and refers to the group's age, gender, occupation, nationality, ethnic background, sexual orientation, etc. Individuals may belong to several demographic groups, such as an American who is a librarian, a computer engineer who is also a knitter. And that's taken from the Introduction to Library of Congress Demographic Group Terms 2020 edition. So let's talk about LCDGT background. In 2013, the Library of Congress began to explore the possibility of developing a controlled vocabulary specific to demographic groups. Terms in the vocabulary would be used to describe the characteristics of two types of entities: the intended audiences of resources and the creators and contributors to resources. The initial 387 terms were approved in 2015, and Library of Congress demographic group terms includes 1,177 approved terms as of April 2020. Again, that's from the Introduction to Library of Congress Demographic Group Terms 2020 edition. So how to use the LDGTT. So LCDGT should be used with the Demographic Group Terms Manual, which contains instructions that are essential for those who wish to understand and apply Library of Congress demographic group terms correctly. The instruction sheets comprising the manual may be freely downloaded from LC's website, and I have the link there. And then that's also taken from the Introduction to Library of Congress Demographic Group Terms 2020 edition. So Library of Congress Demographic Group Terms is a standalone vocabulary that may be used in conjunction with any other controlled vocabulary and descriptive cataloging code. So when to use LCDGT. So use judgment to assign the demographic group terms that will be useful for discovery purposes. There is no limit to the number of demographic group terms that may be assigned to a resource. That's taken from L480, Assignment of Terms, Audience Characteristics. So use the structure of LCDGT to find as close a match as possible between the audience of the resource and the term or terms that exist to express that specific group. Assign a term that is broader or more general than the audience it is intended to cover only when it is not possible to establish a precise term or when an array of terms is needed. If a resource's audience includes several discrete elements, assign a separate term for each element that will be useful for discovery purposes. So where are you going to use LCDGT in a bibliographic record? So the Mark 21 coding of LC demographic group terms describing the audiences of resources is identical in bibliographic records and in authority records for works. Use the 385 field of Mark 21 bibliographic records and authority records for works to describe the intended audience of a resource. The indicators are blank. Subfield A contains an authorized term and does not end with a mark of punctuation unless the term ends in a closing parenthesis. A subfield 2 containing LCDGT is included at the end of each field. Optionally, the field may include a subfield N containing the 3-letter code assigned to the demographic group category. Optionally, it may also include a 0 subfield for the control number of the record of the authorized term used in subfield A. The 385 field is repeatable, as are the subfield A and subfield 0 within a single 385 field. The subfield N is not repeatable. I have provided an example of a 245-385 combination and a 245-385-500 combination, and both were taken from L550 mark coding for audience and bibliographic and work authority records of the LCDGT manual. So let's look at this first example. In the 245, we have an introduction to Spanish for healthcare workers, communication and culture, with a 385 with medical personnel in subfield A. And then there's a second subfield A with English speakers. And then our second example, we have a 245 teaching the scientific literature review, collaborative lessons for guided inquiry. We have two 385 fields. We have librarians and teachers, and then we have a 500 saying a practical guide for teachers and librarians to teach students the steps of developing a scientific literature review, and that is taken from the foreword. So where should you use LCDGT in authority records? Demographic group authority records in classification web take precedence over all other products as authority for LC demographic group terms. Demographic group terms employ the 150 field, authorized term, 450 fields used for references, 550 fields, broader terms or BT, and related terms or RT. And the 668 field, which is the history note or HN. The 670 field is source data found. The 675 field is source data not found. The 680 is the public general note. Each demographic group authority record includes a 072 subject category code field that contains a 3-character alphabetical code and a subfield 2 containing LCDGT. The 072 field is repeatable. I have provided an example of an authority record taken from L545, mark authority records for LC demographic group terms of the LCDGT manual. So you can see in the 072, it's an occupation from subfield A, and the term story editors is in the 150, so that's the term you should use. The 450 is the use for editors, story, so you should not use that one. And from the 668, we can see that it was established in 2015. And the term story editors was found in OED Online, July 31st, 2015. It was not found in the Merriam-Webster Online, December 7th, 2015. It might be in there now, though. And then we have our public note 680 with people who edit film, television, radio, etc. scripts. So ethical demographic group headings. Naming demographic groups and identifying individuals as members of those groups must be done with accuracy and respect. Assign one or more demographic group terms with which a person self-identifies and explicitly discloses. Self-identification is essential. Do not make assumptions about groups that may be associated with a person based on photographs or the use of gendered titles or pronouns. This information is from the LCDGT manual, L400, ethics and demographic group terms. So where should you find this information? Biographical information published in the resource, provided by the publisher, author's personal website or social media profiles, direct communication with the author, or for non-contemporary person, use works by the person, as well as biographies, obituaries, articles, etc. about the person. So gender terms. So LCPCC practice is do not record the element, delete the element from an existing authority record if you're updating it for another reason, and use judgment when deciding whether to record gender information as part of another element. So there are 9 LCDGT categories. So all terms in LCDGT are assigned to at least one of 9 broad categories that serve as the broadest collocation points for terms in those categories. The code in brackets has been assigned by the Library of Congress. So we have age, educational level, ethnic, cultural, language, medical, psychological, and disability, national, regional, occupation, field of activity, religion, and finally social. So the first category is age category. So do not routinely assign the term adults to describe either the intended audiences or the creators, contributors of resources. Assign the term only when the resource explicitly indicates that adults are the intended audience. Do not assign a term from the age category to describe the intended audience if it is so diffuse that the resource can be described as being for a general audience. If the resource explicitly indicates that the intended audience consists of a broad age group, however, assign terms to describe the audience. The example on the slide was taken from L500 age category from the LCDGT manual. So we have a title, Road Adventures USA. The data is for ages 10 and up. The analysis is the audience is explicitly stated. 3 terms are necessary to describe it. So the terms assigned are preteens, teenagers, and adults. Next, we have educational level. So terms in the educational level category refer to the educational level of the group members, such as high school students or college graduates. Groups of students that are based on disciplines or types of schooling, such as history students, medical students, homeschooled students, or Catholic school students do not refer to educational levels and are established in the social category. In Mark Authority records, the educational level category is represented by the 3-letter code EDU. The example on the slide is from L505, educational level category from the LCDGT manual. So the title is Inside the Cell. The audience is high school and college students. The analysis is teenagers and young adults optionally assigned to provide access by age group. So the terms assigned are high school students, college students, teenagers, and young adults. The next category is ethnic cultural. So terms in the ethnic cultural category refer to the ethnic or cultural identification of the group members, such as Armenian Americans, Asian Canadians, Chisonic, or Navajo. In addition to people who self-identify with a particular ethnicity or cultural background, the category includes nationals of one country who permanently reside in another when there is a collective term for them in either English or in the vernacular of the country in which they reside. Terms for collective ethnic groupings based on language, region, etc., are not included unless there is a clear need for them. Oh, hang on, gotta get my mouse back down here. Yay, okay. The category does not include ethnic and cultural groups that are also demonyms, a word or phrase used to refer to people who reside in or are natives of a place associated with a country which is included in the national regional category, such as Germans or Japanese. The examples on the slide are from L510, ethnic cultural category from the LCDGT manual. So we've got Dravidians with Indic people in parentheses, Hmong with Asian people in parentheses, Kyrgyz with Central Asian people in parentheses, Sutu with African people in parentheses, and Muskogee with North American people in parentheses. Okay, our next category is language. So terms in the language category refer to the language associated with the group members, such as Kili speakers, Swahili speakers. Terms based on language groups, such as Slavic languages, are not established until there is a clear need for them. In Mark Authority records, the language category is represented by the 3-letter code LNG. Do not assign a term from the language category only to describe the language in which the resource being cataloged was written, produced, performed, etc. For resources that instruct speakers of one language about another language assign a term from the language category for the language in which the resource is written. Do not assign a demographic group term for the target language, which is the topic, and it is brought out with subject headings. When using Mark Field 377, associated language, either in a bibliographic or personal name authority record, it can include the language a person uses when writing for publication, broadcasting, etc., a language a corporate body uses in its communications, or the language of the family. The first example on the slide is from L515, language category from the LCDGT manual. The second example, American Sign Language users, is taken from the LCDGT list. Notice that they spell out the category rather than using a code. So we've got that first example with the title Collins German English, English German Dictionary, and the terms are English speakers, German speakers. And then the second example, we have American Sign Language users, and then we have language in brackets indicating the category, and it's used for ASL users, users of American Sign Language, and users of ASL. So the medical, psychological, and disability category. So terms in this category refer to the medical or psychological condition or the physical or mental disability of the group members, such as alcoholics, breast cancer patients, or people with learning disabilities. In MARC authority records for established medical, psychological, and disability terms, the category is represented by the three-letter code MPD. The first example on the slide is for a bibliographic record and was taken from L550, MARC coding for audience in bibliographic and work authority records from the LCDGT manual. The second and third examples can be found in the LCDGT list. So our first example, we have a 245 Canadian Bates Guide to Health Assessment for Nurses with a 385 of nurses in subfield A, and then subfield 2 LCDGT. And then the second example, we have Alzheimer's patients with medical, psychological, and disability in brackets for the category. And then the broader term for Alzheimer's patients is just patients. And then that final example, we have amputees with medical, psychological, and disability in brackets indicating the category. And this can be used for amputation patients, people with limb differences, or people with limb loss, and broader term is patients or people with disabilities. The national regional category consists of demonyms, in other words, a word or phrase used to refer to people who reside in or are natives of a place. In MARC authority records, the national regional category is represented by the three-letter code NAT. Assign a term from the national regional category based on statements that indicate current or former residence in a place. Do not attempt to distinguish between people who were born and or grew up in a place and those who moved to that place later in their lives. Do not attempt to discern immigration and naturalization status except as explicitly indicated on the resource itself. In most cases, jurisdictional levels below the first level administrative subdivisions of countries, such as a state or a province, are not in scope for LCDGT. When the audience or creator contributor of a resource resides in a lower jurisdictional level, such as a city, town, or county, assigning the term for the demonym associated with the first level administrative subdivision. Exception: demonyms associated with the country's capital or other prominent city may be established in LCDGT. Do not consider demonyms for local places below the first level administrative subdivision when testing for conflict. Exception: the term for residents of New York State is established in the form New Yorkers with New York State in parentheses to distinguish it from the demonym for New York City. The first two examples on the slide were taken from L525, National Regional Category from the LCDGT manual. The third example, Amsterdamers, can be found in the LCDGT list. So for the first example, we have information. It's an author from Chicago, Illinois. So the term is going to be Chicagoans. The second example, our information tells us this is a directory of polling places in Budapest, Hungary for the 2022 parliamentary election. So the term is going to be Budapestians. And then our final example is Amsterdamers. And we have national regional in brackets telling us that that's the category. And this is used for Amsterdam, Netherlands, and then residents residents, Amsterdammers, and the broader term is Dutch. So the occupation field of activity category refers to the activity or avocation associated with the group members, whether paid or unpaid, such as academic librarians, chess players, or queens. Terms for members of religious orders, such as Benedictines, are not included in the occupation field of activity category. Instead, they are in the religion category. And then C3L535, religion category, for more information. In Mark Authority records, the category is represented by the three-letter code OCC. Do not assign a term from the occupation field of activity category when the term is redundant with the format of the resource being cataloged. Such situations frequently occur when cataloging creative works. The demographic group term composers would not be assigned to a symphony that was created by someone who is primarily known as a composer. The demographic group term composers would be assigned to a novel written by a creator who self-identifies as a composer. The first example on the slide was taken from L550, mark coding for audience in bibliographic and work authority records of the LCDGT manual. As you can see, the 385 field, subfield N, indicates that photographers, subfield A, is an occupation. The second example is from the Library of Congress LCDGT approved monthly list, July 2nd, 2024. Birdwatchers has been added as a new occupation. We can see in the first example, we have Greenberg Ed in the 100 with his birth year in the subfield D, and then in subfield T, we have the title Photographer Survival Manual, and then that is paired with the 385 in the subfield N OCC telling us this is an occupation, and the term is photographers, and that's in subfield A. And then the second example, we have 150, the bird watcher, so that's the term that you're going to use. And the 072 tells us this is an occupation. And then we have two used for references. We've got birders and bird watchers. So you don't use those terms, you use bird watchers as two words. And then there's also a broader term in the 550 of naturalists. So the religion category refers to the religion, denomination, sect, etc., associated with the group members, such as Baha'is, Lutherans, or Protestants. Terms for members of individual congregations are not eligible for inclusion in LCDGT. For example, African Methodist Episcopal Church members refers to a denomination and is eligible, while Ebenezer African Methodist Episcopal Church members would refer to a specific congregation in Fort Washington, Maryland, and is not eligible for inclusion. Terms for members of religious orders, such as Benedictines, are also included in the religion category. In Mark Authority records, the category is represented by the three-letter code REL. The first two examples on the slide are from L555, mark coding for creators in bibliographic and work authority records from the LCDGT manual. The second example, Seventh-day Adventists, is from the Library of Congress LCDGT approved monthly list, August 6, 2024. So we can see we have Muslims and Jews in subfield A for the first two 386s with they both have the subfield 2 LCDGT. And then our second example with the 150 Seventh-day Adventists. So they're changing the heading to Seventh-day Adventists with the lowercase d in day. And then the 072 tells us this is in the religion category with the REL code. And then the 450 is your used for terms. So Seventh-day Adventist Christians, which you're not going to use, you're going to use the Seventh-day Adventists. And then a broader term of Adventist is in the 550 field. So here is the social category. So terms in the social category are identifiable social groups that cannot be included in the other categories, such as adopted parents, children of divorced parents, or vegans. In Mark Authority records, the category is represented by the three-letter code SOC. The example on the slide is from Classification Web Plus, which unfortunately is a paid subscription service. In the 072 field, you see the code SOC in subfield A. Subfield 2 tells us that this is an LCDGT heading. The heading is activists in the 150 field. And then political activists is a C from heading or used for, which means you would not use that subject heading. And I just wanted to give you an example of what it looks like from Classification Web Plus. So now you know what that looks like. All right. So these Library of Congress subject headings are a few examples of demographic group headings. So we have children's films, landscape painting, Australian, and nurses' writings. So we have some subdivision headings. So these subdivisions bring out the characteristics of the audience or the creators and contributors. The first two headings denote the audience, while the last heading denotes the characteristics of the creators. The demographic group headings and these subdivision headings may be used both for resources that are for particular audiences or by members of particular demographic groups, and for resources that are about those resources. This can create confusion for patrons searching these headings. So the first heading is English language with a subdivision of conversation and phrase books, and then you have for business people in parentheses. The second heading, emotions, with a subdivision of juvenile literature, and the third heading, English fiction with Welsh authors as the subdivision heading. So mark field 385, audience characteristics. The 385 field is repeatable but optional. A category of persons for which a resource is intended, or a category of persons representing the intellectual level for which the content of a resource is considered appropriate. Prefer use of a separate field for each audience term. The examples on the slide are from OCLC's Bibliographic Formats and Standards, or BFAS. Subfield M is the demographic group term. Notice that subfield N, demographic group code, precedes subfield A, and subfield A is audience term, and subfield 2 is source. So for the first example, we have a 245 with creative color for the oil painter, and then we have the 385 with occupation, field of activity, and then the term is painters, which is in subfield A. And then the second example, we have talks to teeners in the 245 with a 385 with a subfield N with age category, and then the term subfield A, teenagers. And the final example, we have a 245 with essential Spanish for policemen, lawyers, and judges. And there are three 385s. All of them have subfield N as occupation, and the occupations are police, lawyers, and judges. So mark field 386, creator contributor characteristics. Again, this is a repeatable but optional field. A group category to which the creator or creators of a work or compilation of works, or the contributor or contributors to an expression or compilation of expressions belongs. Prefer use of a separate field for each creator contributor term. The examples on this slide are from OCLC's Bibliographic Formats and Standards, or BFAS. Subfield A is the creator contributor term. Subfield B is the creator contributor code. Subfield M is a demographic group term. Subfield N is the demographic group code. Subfield 2 is the source. And notice that subfield M and subfield N precede subfield A. And then subfield 2, DOT, is the dictionary of occupational titles. And that's found in that first 386. So our first example, we have a 245 with directions and music cataloging with a 386 of catalog librarian. The second example, we have a 245 short story masterpieces by American women writers with two 386s. The first one is from the national regional category, and the term is Americans, which is in subfield A. And the second one is from the occupational field of activity with subfield A, writers. And then the final example in the 245, we have Diamonds Are Forever, artists and writers on baseball. And we have two 386s. Both of them are occupations. The first one is artists, and the second one is writers. So here are the resources that I used to create this presentation. So does anybody have any questions? And here are my colleagues that are on the call with me today. We have Barb Scobie, myself, Mary Cornell, Eric McKinney, Kat Anderberg, Ryan Rafferty, Katie Roberts, and Andrea Joysta.
Thank you, Pam. Everybody can now unmute themselves if you have any questions. Alternately, if you'd prefer to throw those in the chat, we are also monitoring that. So I think Pam is ready for any questions you might have.
Can you see the on the call slide, or did that disappear?
Yep, I can see that.
Okay, cool.
All right, we have a question. Mary, can you use LCSH terms for the 385 and 386 fields in a bibliographic record?
Yes, I believe so. You can use them in both a bib and an authority record. And the slides without the notes are in L2 right now, and I will upload the slides without the notes after the presentation is over. I think we forgot to tell you that. Are there any other questions?
Nothing in chat. You can unmute yourself if you have something you'd like to ask.
If you're brave enough. And I will totally admit I'm not a authority of LCDGT terms. So kind of what was in the presentation is what I know.
Matthew S. says it was a very thorough presentation. I am struggling to think of something you did not cover.
Thank you, Matthew.
That's my problem. My head's so full now that I'm not even sure what to ask. So much good information.
That's a little scary. Eric, did you want to put the link to the evaluation in the chat too?
Sure.
Yes, because if you guys could please fill out the evaluation form, that would be much appreciated. We love your feedback, but we also will be working on FY 2026 online with the CMC topics in the next few months. So we would love to have suggestions from all of you rather than us having to come up with them.
And before I post that, our friends at RSA say, is the CMC consistently using LCGDT on bib and authority records? And Mary has said, I do in authority records, but that's very much cataloger's judgment. Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, those of you who catalog more frequently than I do would have to answer that, but I do add them, yes, to authority records when I create those. But remember, again, these are optional fields too. So probably unless or until someone says they're no longer optional, it's just always going to be up to you whether or not you want to add them.
I will say I don't usually in bib records because a lot of times knowing that information just from what you have in front of you isn't very black and white. You know, so we don't always know like an author's religion or an author's ethnicity or, you know, something like that that we would use the LCGDT for a bib record. It's a little bit more straightforward with an authority record though.
Yeah, and when it's in a bib record, I mean, because usually that's for a group, right? So it's just not always applicable, I would say, to use it as often in a bib record as you would on an authority record.
RSA says, thank you. We were just curious.
Nope, that's totally fine. It's a good thing to be curious. Yep, and Eric posted that link to the evaluation form. And then when I send out the link to the recording, I will also include the link to the evaluation form, just to remind you to please fill it out. Are there any other questions? And I do want to give a shout out to Ryan Rafferty. He's our newest team member, and he's one of our special project catalogers. So if you see his name or face, he is part of the CMC team now. Ryan says hi. We won't make you talk today, Ryan. Well, I guess if nobody has any questions about LCDGT, do you have any questions about cataloging in general that you'd like to ask us while we're here? Eric, do you want to give a plug for the January presentation?
Yes, Barb Scobie and I will be presenting Mapping Our History. So we will be presenting on how to catalog maps, map books, globes, cartographic materials in general. So I believe that's on January 9. So it'll be Thursday at 10 a.m. So yes, if you'd like to join us for us, you can register for that in L2. It will be fun and informative.
Fun is good. All right. Well, I guess you can stop the recording. I just want to thank everybody for being here and listening to our words of wisdom.